Fuck, I need a goddamn haircut.
Spike your hair up.
No, I don't want to spike my hair up. I'll look like a tard. Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome back to Super Kaiju Binge, episode 7, I believe. And today we will be discussing the 1956 massive experiment piece in and of itself, the original Rodan. And of course, joining me today is Shawnee Boy from JTISREBORN. Say hello.
Hello, Jacksonites and everybody else watching this video. It's good to be back. We talked the original 1954 Godzilla last time I was on here, and this time we're going to be talking about the very first film appearance of Rodan, or Radon, or however you want to pronounce it. I'm just going to say Rodan. I can't say Radon. It doesn't. Rodan sounds cooler than Radon.
Well, first off, let me break my drink out.
And what should you be drinking today?
Winco Foods peach flavored sparkling water flavored beverage.
That just sounds awful.
Oh, it's yummy.
All right, well, I'll take your word for it.
And also, Jacksonites, I don't know if you can tell, but pardon my voice. It would seem that with the changing of the seasons comes with a little bit of a head cold.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wait, you better get checked out, Nick. You might have the beer bug.
Get out of here. Anyway. Oh, that's good. So, yes, indeed. The original Rodan. First off, this film is a massive fan favorite amongst the kaiju community. I've seen so many people list this as one of their favorite monster movies of all time, and they say it's just one of the greatest Toho films of all time. To which... Oh, then, of course, there's the monster itself, Rodan, who went on to have a legacy in and of himself. And Rodan has gone on to become one of Toho's big 5 of their most popular monsters. Them, of course, being Godzilla, of course, King Ghidorah, Mechagodzilla, Mothra, and Rodan. To which I have to ask, why?
You know, I really love Rodan. I think the best Rodan was probably King of the Monsters. Like, King of the Monsters had the best Ghidorah and Rodan, I think, if I had to choose. But I think what I like about Rodan, too, is he's kind of a bit of a, on his own side, but, like, he's willing to shift sides, but he's also kind of a bit of an asshole. Like, I rewatched Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster the other day, and some of the funniest scene in the movie is where they're having their, like, they're trying to have a conversation or whatever, the monsters. Godzilla's getting sprayed by Mothra's, like, webbing, and Rodan's just sitting there laughing his ass off, like, noticeably. He's laughing, having a good time. And plus, I think Rodan has a very strong first movie, and he was in kind of like, it's kind of like the first Avengers crossover. I think that's one of the reasons he's stuck in one of the big 5, was because he was legitimately the first one to have his solo movie that kind of crossed over into Godzilla. Like, isn't he the first solo movie right after Godzilla?
Yep. Not counting Half Human, which is not really a monster movie, but this was the first big monster movie after the original Godzilla that Toho made, yes.
Right.
So, yeah, I really have to wonder, why exactly did Rodan go down as one of Toho's big 5? It's probably a number of reasons. One is that, yes, Rodan was the first big monster movie after the original Godzilla. And, of course, this movie was a big hit when it first came out. It also has to do with the fact that Rodan was the first giant monster movie that Toho did that was in color. And not only that, was when a lot of the monster action took place during the broad daylight, which was very ambitious for the time. As a lot of people know, A.G. Tsuburaya shot a lot of the special effects scenes in the original Godzilla at night, partially because it looks great at night, but mostly because if you shoot it at night, it hides a lot of the prototypical chunky flaws, which work to the film's advantage. Now, as much as I do like the fact that this movie takes place during the day a lot of the time, there is an aspect of the effects that I will get into later in this review that I will say has not held up well, and it's solely due to the fact that it takes place during the day. But we'll get to that when we get to it. So, yeah, huh? Damn. Yep. So the legacy for the original Rodan is understandable, but at the same time, I still do have to ask why. So we'll get into our personal history with this film, starting with Shawnee Boy.
Okay, so my first time, I think I saw Rodan. It's kind of tough to remember. It had to be on TV at some point, but I remember AMC used to do their Monster Fest, because TNT did Monster Vision, AMC did Monster Fest, and back when, or was it Monster Fest or Fright Fest? Do you remember, Nick?
It might have been Fright Fest.
Yeah, it was or Fear Fest, or I think it was Fear Fest. I don't know, but they used to do something like, they used to show a lot of kaiju movies back in the day. Like, they'd show a lot of Godzilla films.
It might have been Fear Fest too.
Right. It's tough to remember, but I remember there's some guy, like, they had kind of like a host going on there who would like introduce movies, kind of like Joe Bob Briggs, and it was some guy who'd do a little history of the movie. And I remember I had a VHS recording off the TV of Rodan. And I had that one, and I also had War of the Gargantuas was another one, and I think I had a few others I recorded off the TV just because there'd be commercials in it, but it'd be the only way I'd watch the movie because, you know, this is before I bought the DVD of it. But my first exposure of Rodan, I think, had to be watching the movie. But I think the first time I did see Rodan was in Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. I can't quite remember because I've been watching Godzilla movies as far back as I can really remember, and this is like over 20 years ago at this point. So I think maybe my first time watching it all the way through was by recording it off on AMC programming, and I really enjoyed it. I still prefer Godzilla, obviously, but I mean, I enjoyed the first Rodan. Even rewatching it now, I like how it has like is kind of a bit of a horror film early on that always kind of. That's one thing that really like. There's definitely some tension-filled moments. Like you definitely feel fear. Like when that first Mega Nuon or whatever it is pops up, and I like how it. If you don't know like the title, like if you don't know Rodan's in the movie, you kind of started out like, what's Rodan? Like you don't know there's a flying pterodon monster in there, and you really like. I like how it starts out as like a completely different monster, and then like it's really leading to something else entirely, like based on the beginning. Like there's some really horrifying scenes and some blood too in the first Rodan movie, which I was kind of shocked to see. But I liked it. I definitely liked the dark violence to this movie.
Yeah, me too.
But, yeah, that's my initial history with it, at least for what I can remember.
Well, my history with the original Rodan, I wouldn't really say it's too complicated. So, my first exposure to Rodan was, of course, in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2. That was my very first exposure to Rodan. But as I went on and as I became more involved with apparently Ryan finds it boring.
Is he in the chat?
Yeah, he is. As I got more into the kaiju community, of course I learned that Rodan had his own movie back in the 50s through James Rolfe when he did his Godzilla-thon. So, and I also remember seeing the very first DVD release of the original Rodan movie at a Target, at a Fred Meyer of all places. Really wanted to get that, but was not able to because my dad is a hater. No, I'm not gonna say that. But it wasn't until a few years later when I got the opportunity to go on a big spending spree on Amazon, and I decided that I wanted to get the double bill with Rodan and War of the Gargantuas, and this was before it went out of print. I got this for like $12, I believe. So I was like, okay.
Yeah, I got that same set. I got it at Best Buy. I just happened to see it, and I was so excited. Like, oh my God, it's War of the Gargantuas and Rodan on DVD. Because again, this is like before Amazon time, and I was like so excited. Like, it's in the stores. I have to get this right now. So it was exciting to me.
This was also the same. This is also the same Amazon trip that I bought Godzilla 2000 and King Kong Escapes. So, I guess you could really say that I was in a kaiju mood at the time.
Oh yeah.
So, the first movie of the two that I watched, I believe, was Rodan. Or not of that whole Amazon load. I think that was actually Predator 2. But the first monster movie that I watched, I believe, was the original Rodan. And stupidly, I decided to watch the American cut, which we are not talking about in this review. I'm just going to say the American cut is far inferior to the Japanese version.
I watched them both, so I'm like, they're like the same movie to me, basically. So
it's 10 minutes shorter, and this is already a short movie. It's only 82 minutes long, and the American cut is only 70 minutes long. But the biggest problem and why I say the American cut is inferior is the picture quality looks like shit.
Yeah, the picture quality in the American cut is a massive downgrade compared to like, it's not like the worst I've ever seen, but like compared to the Japanese cut, like a lot of those Toho Showa films, like remastered, look really, really great on some of these DVDs. Like Frankenstein versus Baragon is one, for example. I think just the way it's shot on film, like I think so a lot of 70s and like 60s films that Toho shot, like with these kind of remastered DVDs and Blu-rays, I think they look great.
Agreed.
Rodan, the American cut, it's definitely like
it's really scratchy and grainy, and it looks like
grainy.
It looks like it was recorded with a whole shitload of dust in the recording room. It looks like ass.
Right, and that's the thing about these older movies; they're not going to look ideal. Really, I feel like if you kind of like factor in like the first few movies, like things start to get better. Like once they hit the 60s, I think Monster vs. Godzilla looks really good.
Well, I can understand somewhat that these prints are old and they weren't preserved very well at first. But even still, I've seen better American-looking cuts of older Toho movies. But like the American cut of War of the Gargantuas, I think looks superior to the Japanese version.
Right. And it's kind of crazy watching both cuts of that movie because they're so distinctly different. Like one, referencing Frankenstein, like Frankenstein, what? I remember the first time I watched the Japanese cut, I'm like, why the hell are they calling it Frankenstein? Because the American cut, it's like, it kind of hides the fact that it's
de-sequelified, as James Rolfe calls it.
De-sequelified.
Anyway, so hang on. Back to Rodan. So I watched the Japanese cut a few months after I watched the original Rodan. And I also have to say, Ryan brought this up just now. If you can somehow shell out the money for this double bill, I highly recommend watching this original documentary, Bringing Godzilla Down to Size. If you want a really, really good, comprehensive, and informative history on Toho's monster stuff, watch this documentary. It is very, very good, and it's very, very insightful and informative. There's an excellent special feature for this.
Yeah, I think that's the one that had the Toho suit actors on it too. Like for Godzilla, it had the 3 of them.
There was a segment toward the end of it that had all 3 of the Haru Nakajima, Kenpachiro Satsuma, and the third guy from the Millennium series. But anyway, so
some fun with it.
So I watched the Japanese cut, and I was a lot more impressed. Actually, I think the first time, now that I think about it, no, it wasn't. It wasn't that. But the first time in a long time that I had watched it was when I did my original My Hondathon series. And this was also after I had rewatched Adam Noise's review of Rodan for his Ishiro Hondathon. And at that time, I gained a much greater appreciation for the film. And if you recall in my original My Hondathon review, I gave this movie a 9 out of 10. And unfortunately, I'm going to have to disappoint a lot of you guys. I don't like this movie nearly as much as I did originally. But my initial thoughts on Rodan is I think in some ways it is as important as the original Godzilla in terms of significance, and especially towards the kaiju genre, in many,
Right.
many
Like, it was a
ways.
big hit in the States.
Yeah, this movie also was a huge hit in the States. It was released as a double bill later down the line with Gigantus the Fire Monster. Um,
This is better.
Way better.
The American cut? Yeah, the American cut's way, way better than the Gigantus the Fire Monster one.
Yep,
Oof.
agree.
Oh, banana oil.
But at the same time, I just really, really have to ask once again, why is this movie so highly regarded amongst the kaiju community? Because while this is a good movie, I don't really think it's one of the best monster movies ever made, if I'm being 100% honest.
Yep.
So, with all that being said, let's get into the plot of the.
All right, let's talk this plot. I'm going to take a nap, and I'll let you get talking.
You do that. In the small mining village of Kitamatsu on the southern Japanese island of Kyushu, 2 miners have gone missing. Is this a coal mine?
I would assume so. I can't think of what else they're mining. Maybe gold mining. I don't know. I'd assume coal mine. It kind of seems that way.
The 2 men, Goro and Yoshi. Okay, where's Mario? Had brawled earlier that day, and after they entered the mine to start their shift, the entire mine shaft had completely flooded, which is mysterious because they already established there was no water there previously. Shigeru Kawamura, played by a very young first appearance of Kenji Sahara, a tunneling and safety engineer at the mine, heads below to investigate and discovers Yoshi's lacerated corpse. Above ground, a doctor examines Yoshi and discovers the cause of death was a series of deep gashes caused by an abnormally sharp object. Some of the miners and their families begin to discuss the possibility of the involvement of Goro in his death. 2 local miners and a policeman are later attacked and slain by an unseen assailant in this flooded mine shaft, and their bodies are recovered and examined, and the same doctor announces they were killed by the same sharp object. That night, Shigeru and his fiancée Kyo are attacked by a creature resembling a giant insect larva at Kyo's home. The police start hunting the creature, and it kills 2 police officers before escaping into the mine. The police and Shigeru notice that the officers' wounds match the same wounds of the murdered 3 people. Shigeru, accompanied by police and soldiers, head into the mine where they discovered the butchered body of Goro. This movie's got quite a body count. And are chased by the insect monster. Shigeru crushes the creature with runaway mine carts, but after another insect appears, the tunnel caves in, trapping Shigeru in the mine. The next day, Dr. Kashiwagi, played by Akihiko Hirata, identifies the giant insect as a meganeuron, an ancient species of dragonfly larvae. An earthquake suddenly strikes the area, and rumors begin to circulate that Mount Aso, the volcano that eclipses Kitamatsu, might be on the verge of a massive eruption. When the police head to the volcano to investigate the damage caused by the earthquake, they discover that the only road to the mines has collapsed, but to their surprise, they also find an amnesic Shigeru wandering around the epicenter. Several miles away in Kyushu, an airbase receives an alert from a jet fighter. This pilot reports an unidentified flying object performing impossible maneuvers at supersonic speeds. Per orders, he pursues the object, but it swings around and at supersonic speed flies over the jet and destroys it, killing the pilot in the process. After recovering remains of the jet and the pilot's helmet, the base gets word that a British airliner has been shot down by an aerial object resembling this supersonic UFO. Soon after, more incidents are reported from China, Okinawa, and the Philippines of aerial objects causing major destruction, and the probability is established that there is more than one of these UFOs flying around. still foggily surmised as aircraft visible only via contrails at a ultra high altitude, are engaged in such predations. Amid constant news reports of these mysterious attacks, a newly married couple disappears around Mount Aso along with several cattle. Food. When the authorities develop the film from the newlyweds' camera, they discover a photograph of what appears to be a gigantic wing. Immediately ruling out the possibility of an aircraft, authorities match the photo with a drawing of a prehistoric pteranodon. Though why wouldn't you go with birds first? Whatever. And surmise the UFO is indeed a living being, but they want testimony from Shigeru before they can accurately account for these attacks. Meanwhile, Shigeru's treatment is progressing slowly, and one day in Shigeru's hospital room, Kyo shows him the eggs of her pet birds have been laid, and as one of them hatches, Shigeru has a massive flashback and recalls that he woke up deep within the mine after the cave-in and found himself surrounded by hordes of Meganeuron. And in the middle of this cave was a gigantic egg, from which Shigeru watched a massive bird-like creature emerge, and the shock of his memory cures his amnesia. After descending into the cave with police and scientists, Shigeru finds a fragment of the colossal egg, and Dr. Kashiwagi examines the fragment in his lab and calls a meeting with townspeople and members of the JSDF. He tells the men that the object seen flying at supersonic speeds is a giant pterosaur that he has dubbed Rodan. Kashiwagi theorizes that nuclear bomb testing may have been the cause of Rodan's awakening. It's one minor issue that I have with this movie's plot. Rodan emerges from the ground near Mount Aso and takes flight and heads for Kyushu with a squadron of JASDF planes hot on its tail. After one of its wings is clipped, Rodan flies to Fukuoka, where the sonic waves and windstorms from its wings lay waste to the city, which is easily the best part of the film. Suddenly, the JSDF reports that a second Rodan has been spotted flying towards the city, and after leveling Fukuoka and the remaining buildings in flames, the two Rodans fly away to Mount Aso. The JSDF formulate a plan to have the military fire at the base of Mount Aso, burying the Rodans alive. Shigeru retreats with Kyo to safety, and the military begins its attack, triggering a massive eruption, which looks so cool. Mount Aso spews smoke and lava into the sky, and the fumes overtake the Rodans, causing them to perish on the molten slopes of the volcano, thus kind of anticlimactically ending this film. So, Shawnee Boy, what is your thoughts on this movie's plot?
Well, the plot for Rodan I found to be, it's a pretty simple monster movie plot, but it does have elements that kind of separate it. For instance, in terms of kaiju films, there's some pretty bloody sequences. You can see, like, the bodies being mangled, the miners getting killed. Like, I like the small-scale violence and, like, the creature feature elements when it's kind of goes small-scale. And then when Rodan comes into it, like, it really, like, makes the movie seem a lot bigger. I think the flying sequences are, well, I kind of want to get to, what I'm going to say is definitely part of my pros, but like the flying sequences definitely are really impressive, at least, especially for the time. I think the plot works fine. It's just a simple monster movie plot. There's no really big commentary or themes as much as there were in the original Godzilla. It kind of just is, okay, this is a straight up monster movie.
Well, I can definitely see a little bit of subtext, like some kind of parallel lines between the main two characters and the Rodans, but I do think it is a little. It's a little bit made to be like a mountain out of a molehill, but I can see some subtext there. But there is elements of.
You got to look for it, but it's not there as present as it was in like the original Godzilla.
Nah.
At least that's definitely not there as much. But like other things, this thing I like that it also taps into a bit of PTSD. I think that's something I wish more kaiju films would have tapped into at the time, at least, because like when the one individual like comes back, like he's like he's fully traumatized and horrified by what he saw. And I really like the sequence where he's just kind of looking at like the birds hatching, and then all of a sudden it triggers his memory. And I thought that was pretty cool. You didn't really see that too much in a lot of these movies, really exploring bits of PTSD. So I like those elements, and like the ending itself. Again, it's not like this grandiose kind of ending. It is a bit of a downer in terms of an ending. I'll give you that. Like where both Rodans are like horrifically like murdered. I think that's why
they're King Konged.
Yeah, they're King Kong. That's why in King of the Monsters, like Rodan is coming out of the volcano. That's kind of like Mike's way of making up for the ending to Rodan that really upset him as a kid. So again, I think the plot. I think it's fine. It's very simple, easy to follow. It's nothing like really grandiose, like not like the most engaging human story of all time. It's just a simple monster movie plot, and you're there more for the monsters than the humans. And the humans aren't super annoying or anything like that. Like I think they're fine. But like the plot's just fine. It's simple. It's straightforward. Like there's no real like major issues I have with it. So there you go.
Well, my initial thoughts on this film, I honestly feel like the plot is, yes, it's very straightforward, simple monster movie. It's not nearly as allegoric or metaphoric as the original Godzilla, and I don't really think that was their intent. I think this movie was just a big, massive experiment piece in and of itself because Toho managed to get its hands on some new technology and they wanted to do something new for the genre. And in that case, I think this movie does succeed. And also, it allowed Ishiro Honda to make, in some ways, an even darker movie than the original Godzilla.
Oh, yeah. The blood and the murders. The way the miners, like, there's some real, again, I'm kind of getting to my pros. Well, you know, I'll say that for the pros portion, but like you said, it did allow them to get into more darker elements that they couldn't showcase as much in the first Godzilla movie.
But overall, I actually kind of think this movie is a bit of a mixed bag. There are a lot of good things about this movie, but there's a lot of weak elements that I think do hold this movie back quite a bit, in my opinion. But it's a good movie. I like the plot that it does feel very unique, especially for its time. Like Sean says, if you didn't know that this was a movie about a giant pteranodon, you wouldn't know until more than halfway through the film. And also, I don't really call this a horror movie, but I definitely would say this is a very dark and gritty monster movie, and I like that about this film. I wish more movies had this kind of tone where it's not necessarily bleak per se, but it's just a dark and gritty and kind of serious, or not kind of serious. It is much more of a serious monster movie. But also there's a part of me that thinks that Rodan's kind of the wrong kind of monster to showcase. Like, I think they should have taken this kind of tone and this type of grittiness and applied it to War of the Gargantuas, and applied the tone from War of the Gargantuas and applied it more to Rodan, because I almost want to say that for the tone that this movie is conveying, I almost think Rodan is the wrong kind of monster to showcase. Because I don't know about you, but with this kind of tone, I would find Sanda and Gyra to be scarier than Rodan. But that's just me. But yeah, I do think this movie's plot is very good for a straightforward monster movie. But there just are some elements that hold it back for me. So Shawnee Boy is eager to get into his pros, so go right ahead.
All right, so for pro number one, I'm going to go with the horror elements, kind of like what you were just saying. This one, like, because the first Godzilla film, I consider it almost kind of a horror film, a bit too, with some of the stuff that happens. But with this one, like, they're allowed to get a little bit darker in some areas, like the way the miners are killed. The way, like, you definitely feel fear when they're inside the mine. You're in a claustrophobic environment, and, like, sometimes you don't see things that are pulling you under, like, the water when they're going through the mine. Like, they're just getting, their bodies are getting mutilated, people are getting eaten and, like, ripped apart.
Almost like Jaws.
Like, simple things. Yeah, like Jaws, and like this is 1955. Like compared to a
Six.
lot of other movies, they're like are a lot more restrained. Like this one, like when you see those bodies mutilated, you're like, oh god, like that's a lot for like this day and age, especially the 1950s, that wasn't like ready to go that far.
And this was only
again,
2 or
55.
3 years before Hammer films would start really pushing the boundaries of horror and gore with The Curse of Frankenstein.
Right, absolutely. Like this is like before Hammer was getting their things, like the first color thing. Like so, I think that helped it too. Like I said, I like the horror elements to it. You definitely feel the fear of the characters involved. Even when what was his name, Shigiro comes back, like he's got his PTSD he's dealing with. You can feel the terror. Like when he saw this thing, it absolutely horrified him. So again, that's pro one horror elements, and like they kind of tie into like other pros a bit there. Like I guess I'll kind of combine that a bit with like the PTSD exploration. I guess that's also kind of I kind of only that into the horror element pro, I guess. But that's something you didn't really see in a lot of these Toho films. I can't think of another one that really dived into it so much as like the pure terror of like something somebody saw and how that had a massive effect on them, and it took a while for them to kind of like come over it a bit, and like you can see it like really left an impact on was it Kenji Sahara?
Yes.
Yeah, it really left an impact on him. And again, I really like that. I thought that was something that like the Godzilla films really didn't do much of. I'm trying to think, did any of them really kind of dive into PTSD with any of the humans?
Like the main scientist character in The Return of Godzilla, I could definitely argue has some massive PTSD because it's implied that he witnessed his parents' death at the hands of Godzilla.
And I think Godzilla against Mechagodzilla with what was it, the main actress, like her character definitely, well, like you didn't really feel the PTSD as much, but you definitely felt the guilt.
Yes, kind of a fine line.
This one, yeah, like this one definitely again like exploring PTSD with the humans, like definitely like added to the fear factor of the monsters. So again, the Meganulon, like the costumes themselves are kind of good, but at a young age, I definitely felt some fear when they were around and you didn't see them just like horrifically murdering people. There's definitely some tension involved there. So yeah, horror elements, that's definitely pro number one for me. So I really like the horror elements to this movie.
All right, continue.
I guess I'll go with pro number two. Pro number two, I guess kind of like what you were saying, what we kind of spoke about earlier was I like the way that this movie started out with one monster before building up to Rodan. Because, like I said, you start this movie out, you have no idea. Like, you see the title Rodan, you don't know it's a flying monster movie. You just start watching it, and then you don't realize until halfway through, like, oh, we're building up to a completely other monster. And I think that's kind of a neat twist to it. So I like that, which leads me into like the next pro, which I guess pro number
3,
2 or 3 or whatever.
3.
Pro number 3 is Rodan. I love Rodan. I think Rodan is one of my favorite kaijus within the Toho roster. He's definitely one of the big 5, and deservedly so. Again, I like how we actually had 2 Rodans too in this movie. Like that's
it's a good twist.
Yeah, that's a neat twist that there's 2 of them. And Baby Rodan's also pretty adorable when it first shows up. I'll say that too. And Rodan, like, because Rodan is different, because like Rodan is different from Godzilla. Rodan can wipe out a city a lot faster than Godzilla due to the supersonic speeds. And even then, like when you get to like the aerial combat scenes, which is my next pro, which I thought were really impressive, especially for the time, like when they're flying up there and you're kind of up in like the cockpits and that, and you're seeing some pretty elaborate action sequences for the time, a nice use of the miniatures. And Rodan's definitely really intimidating because you're up there and you're trying, even at their fastest speeds, like they still can't catch him. And like just within an instant, he can just fly over a city and just wipe it out in an instant. Because Godzilla definitely takes his time when wiping your Tokyo, but because of Rodan's like being like a moving hurricane or a tornado that just rips through everything, and the fact that like people are dying horrific deaths, like fucking A, the first time like they're flying up in the sky and that one pilot gets killed, you just find his bloody helmet in the next scene. I'm like, Jesus, that's a lot for the time. But yeah, like I said, I like Rodan. Rodan's personality definitely got fleshed out more in subsequent films, but I just really like Rodan. I like the design, more pterodon-esque. And then obviously he develops, or is it a he and a she with Rodan in this?
Yeah, it's male and a female.
Right. you definitely see Rodan evolve over the course of some of the other films, with personality getting fleshed out a bit more too. But again, I really like Rodan's design. I think this is my favorite of the show of designs. I like this design a little bit more than Ghidorah, the three-headed monster.
Yeah, I don't really care for the future show of Rodan designs. He doesn't look like a giant pteranodon. He looks like a giant pigeon.
Yeah, like Pidgeotto. That's what, maybe that's where they got inspired by Pidgey and Pidgeotto from the Pokemon games. But yeah, that's the next pro. I guess, is that pretty much all the pros? Like I said, I like the action sequences. I like the use of the miniatures. There were some impressive aerial combat things. Akari Fukube, well, I guess that's kind of like a bit of a pro, but like also a bit of a con. I don't think this is nearly his best score. But like some of the elements in there I still like. But again, I think it could have been better. I guess it's kind of a con. But yeah, so those are kind of my basic pros. I think Rodan's really cool. I like the horror elements to it. I like a lot of the action sequences. I think those are pretty fun and exciting. Special effects in some instances I think are good, and then others, well, they're not quite as good. But especially for the time, I think a lot of it's very ambitious and, like you said, experimental. But yes. I definitely did appreciate it. I do appreciate the film itself and like what it was trying to, I guess, a lot of what it accomplished. Like, again, showcasing new technology. It's the first Toho monster movie in color. Some impressive aerial sequences, which we didn't see in the original Godzilla film so much. I mean, you had this stuff with the planes, but it always felt very staticky. But this one, you actually feel like you're up there in the sky, kind of flying around in the cockpit. And you have Rodan, you have like the fear. You don't even see Rodan initially when he's first there. You just kind of get like the little streaks that he leaves in the sky. And just the fact that, like, despite our best technology, we just can't keep up with this thing or stop it. So I really like that. So, yeah, I guess those are my pros. Can't think of anything else off the top of my head. But, yeah, just very brief.
Alrighty, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Surprisingly, I have 9 pros for the original Rodan.
All right, get started.
So, pro number 1 is, I'll just say it, Rodan himself. Obviously, the highlight of the movie is going to be Rodan because he's the title monster. But I really like this original design for the original Rodan. I like that, obviously, if you take one look at it, you're just like, yeah, that's a giant pteranodon. And I really don't like they really played up the bird aspects of Rodan in later installments, except for the Final Wars Rodan. I just like that because I think that's the best design for Rodan. But I don't like the more bird-like aspects that they incorporated into future Rodans. I love that this is clearly just a giant pteranodon. So I love Rodan's design in this movie. I love his face mostly. Like, he definitely looks very reptilian. And to quote Andres Perez, I like that he kind of has a wicked smile.
Right. I love Rodan's personality, especially how it gets fleshed out in later films. So even King of the Monsters, like that moment where he's fighting the jets, he smiles at one point, like, okay, that's pretty great. Like yeah, Rodan's personality, like I think Rodan's a bit of an asshole, and that's what I kind of like about him.
Yeah, he's kind of a little bit of a sadistic douchebag. And,
and I love that. He's the Starscream of the Godzilla universe,
as Jackie Boy says. So, one aspect I really like about this Rodan design is that his eyes are like jet black, and there's like the hood of his eyebrows kind of keeps his eyes in shadow, a little bit like the Bio Goji design from Godzilla vs. Biollante. Yep. But when you do see his eyes, it almost kind of looks like he's like wickedly smiling when he's looking around. I also love his roar. Rodan's roar is a lot more deep and screechy in this movie. They really toned down the screechiness in later Rodan designs. Excuse me. I felt better. But I love Rodan's roar. It's a lot more threatening and menacing in this film, and that adds to this movie's atmosphere and tone. I also love this Rodan's color scheme.
Yeah, I think it looks great.
It's in later Rodan, specifically in the Showa series. I really don't like the color that they use for Rodan's suit because it looks a lot more. It just looks like a muddled, dark brownish color. So, especially in Ghidorah Three-Headed Monster, when he's fighting Godzilla and they're just going at fisticuffs, they just kind of blend together as one blob of blackish brown. I really wish they could have kept the reddish brown color of the original Rodan because it makes him stick out a lot more. And especially with this movie being in color, Rodan's color himself really does stick out in a positive way. It also does help to make him look a little bit more threatening. And it helps to make him stand out amongst his environment in Mount Aso. I don't know how you pronounce it, Aso or Aso. I don't fucking know.
Mount Asshole.
Okay. So I love this version of Rodan's color. I just like this Rodan. I wish they could have stuck with this version throughout the rest of the Showa series, except Pigeon Dan.
Yeah, Pidgeotto Rodan. Now I can't. Now I'm not gonna see Rodan. Like, you know what's funny is when I had Pokemon like Red, Yellow, and Blue, and I captured Pidgey, I would name it. I would change the nickname to Rodan, so it's kind of fitting that way.
Pro number 2 is this movie has a decent cast of characters. Specifically, I'm going to talk about Shigeru. What's his name? Dr. Kashiwagi and kind of Kyo. Aside from these 3 characters, the rest of the human cast is just typical giant monster movie cast, which it's already 2 movies into the giant monster craze with Toho, and they're already typical giant monster movie characters. But again, at least they're you can tell they're a giant monster movie cast, which isn't bad. They all fulfill their roles, like the chief of police and the general of the military and all this stuff. Everybody plays their part well, and they do take this seriously. They take the subject matter seriously once they find out that we have a couple giant pteranodons flying around. But the 3 main characters, the weakest of which is kind of Kyo. She doesn't really have a whole lot of screen time by herself. Actually, she has barely any screen time by herself. But there's one aspect of this movie's allegory. I'm not going to talk about the allegory that much, other than I'll just say it's more about love and how Shigeru and Kyo are always there for each other, just like how the Rodans are always there for each other. When Kyo is upset about Goro possibly being a murderer, Shigeru is there by her side, just like trying to say, "Hey, I don't think Goro's a killer because those 2 are friends." Yada yada yada. And also, when Shigeru is suffering from his amnesia, she's right there by his side, and she never leaves. It kind of reminds me of my relationship with my wife. Because as you can tell, she's kind of sick right now, and I'm always there for her when she's sick, and she's always there for me when I'm sick, especially trying to have me drink the nasty ass green cough syrup.
Aw, how adorable! Hey Nick, your lips are looking a little chapped after the ass kissing you just got done doing. Are you okay? I once said that after a work meeting. Like, there's this one person, this one girl was talking, and she was just like kissing ass to a lot of the executives. And as soon as they left the room, I pulled out some chapstick and I handed it to her. And the whole, the rest of the people in the room were laughing hysterically. I'm like, hey Taylor, your lips are looking a little chapped after all that ass kissing you just got done doing. Here you go.
Now I would have said, hey, here's a tissue. Your nose is looking a little too brown from all that ass kissing you're doing there.
Yeah, it worked out in the situation because I just happened to have chapstick in my pocket. I'm like, I can't not pass this up. So it's one of my proudest burns.
Well, I got a burn to tell you once this review is over, but that's entirely different. Anyway, so yeah, the main characters. Yeah, Shigeru is easily probably the best character in this movie. Again, played by a very young Kenji Sahara. This was his first film. First Toho film. I don't know.
He's the only character I really remember in the movie, personally.
Kind of mostly for me too, because A, he is the main character, and also because I like Kenji Sahara.
Yeah, Kenji Sahara is pretty good. He was in a couple Toho films.
He was in a lot of Toho films.
Yeah, he's in a lot of them.
What was I gonna say? Oh yeah, so I like that they do add the PTSD and amnesia elements. And one of my favorite aspects about Shigeru's acting here is when they showcase the flashback, I always got the sense that Shigeru still had all of his memories and he was completely coherent when he woke up surrounded by all the Mega Nulons and in Rodan's cave. But I always took it as soon as Rodan finished eating all the Mega Nulons and he took to the skies, I love how Shigeru looks around and he's all freaked out, and then his body language and his facial expressions change. It's just like his brain just shut down and he just turned into a zombie. He just slowly just slumps away and turns around and just wanders away with no means in the world. I like that aspect of his acting. It may have been unintentional, but that's how I always saw it. As soon as he saw Rodan, his mind was in complete shock, and it just stunned him into a zombie-like state. So I like that about his acting, and also the expressions on his face when he's trying to remember shit, and he looks at Kyo, and he doesn't remember her, and you can see on his face that it looks like he's really trying to remember her, but he can't. And the look on his face as he's looking at the Pteranodon photos and the Mega Nulon photos, and then when he sees the eggs hatching, the look on his face, like you can tell that he goes from zombie back to Shigeru in the snap of a finger. And then when we come out of the flashback, he just has this look of utter terror on his face, and he's drenched in sweat. It's good. What's the word? I don't want to say character acting, but it's like, I'll just say it's really good body language. And I've always wondered, like, when people have amnesia and they start to gain all their memories, like, is it all at once, or is it just like a slow trickle? Like you remember some things here and there and there, and then gradually all of it comes back to you? Or do you just get like big chunks of it at a time? Like you remember a big part of your life from this moment, and then a big part of your life this moment. I've always wondered, like, how the hell do people with amnesia regain their memories? And I know with some people, the amnesia is permanent because of brain damage, but it just depends. Yeah, I like Shigeru and Akihiko Hirata making his. I don't know if he was in Half Human. I don't believe that he was, but his first appearance since the original Gojira in a Toho monster movie. His character is pretty basic, but at least he is proactive in figuring out what Rodan is and like how old he is and how he theorizes of how he came back to life, and the characteristics of Pteranodons he explains to the characters, and their thinking and behavior patterns he explains to the characters. So I like Akihiko Hirata's character. Again, it's kind of basic. It's just like a typical know-it-all, just so happened to coincidentally know every single thing about the movie's monster, but it's still pulled off well, and Akihiko Hirata does a good job in terms of the acting. Other than those three characters, the rest of the cast is just typical. It's not terrible. It's not great, but they do their purpose. Pro number 3 is the scenery and the colors. Now, of course, this was the very first giant monster movie to be shot in color. And while in many areas it looks kind of faded, we'll talk about that when we get to the cons. In the broad daylight, looking at all the more mountainous green landscape of the Japanese mountain area, this movie has some really gorgeous cinematography, and there's a lot of wide shots of just the landscape, like green fields and green covered mountains in the broad daylight that just look really pretty. It makes me think of like mid-spring weather where it's not too hot, but it's not too cold either. It's just perfect. I've always liked that weather. And there's also a lot of matte paintings, and there's a lot of green screens, which all the matte paintings in this movie look really good in color. There's a lot of shots of different countries that look really good, and there's a lot of wide open shots of the city, like Fukuoka and Kyushu, in color that look really pretty. One of my favorites is, I think it's like a helicopter shot of the bridge that Rodan destroys. That looks really, really good. The river looks really blue, and the sky is like a bright light blue. And then there's the bridge and the city. It all looks very, very good in color. And again, for a movie that came out in 1956, this being Toho's first color monster movie, it's obvious that it was their first color movie, but they definitely did really start out strong with this movie looking good in color, which is great. Pro number 4 is I'll just say this real quick, the acting. I kind of already could group this in with the characters, but yeah, the acting overall is very, very solid. Everybody gives a good performance. Again, the kind of the weakest performance is the actress who plays Kyo. Not nearly as bad as Momoko Kochi from the original Godzilla. Like, she actually does show emotion throughout this movie, like when she's caring for Shigeru, or she's worried about Goro, or when she's just standing by Shigeru's side toward the end of the movie. I kind of still don't buy their romance, but not nearly as bad as Ogata and Emiko in the original Gojira. Like, there is a little bit of feelings and emotions with these two, but it still, in some scenes, comes off a little flat. But overall, the acting in this movie is pretty decent. Let's see. Pro number 5 is this movie's gritty tone. Hang on, that sneeze. I really like this movie's tone. Like I said, I don't know whether to say Frankenstein versus Baragon is darker or lighter than this movie. But if there is another movie that comes close, it definitely is Frankenstein versus Baragon. But I really like this movie's tone because it does convey some horror elements that I really, really do like. And it definitely feels a lot more dark and serious. Would I call this Ishiro Honda's number 1 most darkest movie? I don't really know. Because there's a few movies that could be called that. What would you say, Sean?
What's that?
What would you say is Sean's, totally. What would you say is Ishiro Honda's darkest and grittiest film? Because I've heard a lot of people say it's this movie.
It's kind of maybe in some ways a toss-up between this and the original Godzilla, because I don't think it really dived into anything that dark sense. I mean, War of the Gargantuas had some bits that I felt like got pretty dark, with the Gargantua, like, eating people, like, actually picking them up and just chewing them up and spitting them out. That stuck with me. Like, that shit gave me nightmares when I was younger. And I think that's one of the reasons the movie stuck with me as much, was the Green Gargantua just, like, grabbing ships, eating people, just kind of lurking around, having terrifying elements there. Really, I feel like his darkest movies, I guess, that one, Rodan, and the original Godzilla. I don't think it got quite as dark since then. I can't think of any of them that. Well, you know what? Terror of Mechagodzilla got pretty dark too. Like the simian leader in the second Mechagodzilla movie is literally whipping people. Is like, have them executed. Like, after he just proceeds to like whip them, Katsura getting like kind of like surgically turned into a cyborg. There's definitely some elements in that movie that get pretty dark too, and like stuff with Mifune. It's almost kind of like a gothic horror movie at times with some of like the Fuku-based score and just some of the visuals. So I'd say the darkest movies from him: Original Godzilla, Rodan, War of the Gargantuas, and Terror of Mechagodzilla. If I had to pick the top 4 darkest, I can't think of any that come close in terms of
Frankenstein
darkness.
versus Baragon.
Frankenstein versus Baragon, yeah, like that one too, I guess. Because that and War of the Gargantuas are kind of like, they're so like kind of neck and neck in terms of like stylistic tone and all that. But I don't know. I just always kind of felt that Gargantuas was a little bit darker.
I say it's Frankenstein versus Baragon because that movie talks a lot about Hiroshima.
Right. I just meant like in terms of like something on-screen horror per se. Like I always felt like Gyra was a lot more imposing and scary than anything in Frankenstein versus Baragon. I mean, because I watched those movies a lot as a kid, but like I said, the Green Gargantua, like that thing, like stuck with me, giving me kind of nightmares a lot when I was little. Just how it would just kind of like just go and grab somebody and just eat them, and just like you just be like submerged like underwater and just kind of like waiting just to strike at any moment. So that always kind of stuck with me, and like a lot of the human qualities to it, and like obviously Nakajima's performance is really, really good. I think that's his personal favorite role that he's done, even more so than Godzilla. Like the performance he's most proud of was as the Green Gargantua. But
well, anyway, back to Rodan.
But yeah, again, it's one of his darker movies.
So I don't know about Rodan being Ishiro Honda's darkest movie, but it definitely is one of his darkest films and his grittiest films. The whole movie just kind of has this, well, almost till the very end. It just has this kind of doomy feel to it. Like, you know, these two pteranodons really do pose a massive threat to humanity, and also with the first half of this movie, with all the mega neurons rolling around, seemingly these bugs are almost impossible to kill. And I think Patrick Galvin at one point stated that the first half of this movie is pretty much just a Japanese version of Them, the giant ant movie from 1954. I can kind of see that, and I actually was having some Them flashbacks when I was watching the first half of this movie, but it feels very rushed and abridged. It leads into one of my cons with this movie, but I'll get to that later. But I just like the tone of this movie. It's very doomy and grim, and I wouldn't necessarily say, well, actually, no, I would say it's gritty because you see all the deaths in this movie. There's 5 people killed by these bugs, and they're all viciously killed. They have their necks, heads, or chests slashed open by the Mega Neulon's claws. I wouldn't be surprised if...
Like I said, I was going to say, like I said earlier, like the scene after Rodan's first attack on that fighter pilot, you just see the bloody helmet. Like, that's enough. Like, you don't have to see what exactly happened. Like, that image stuck with me. I always remember that in the first Rodan. We're like, Jesus, like, that's a lot for this movie. It's a lot of blood.
Yep, there's that too. So yeah, I would definitely say this movie has a very good tone. I kind of wish they used this a little bit more with monster movies, but I mean they do, but not nearly as often as the Shinichi Sekizawa campy but also dark tone. But I like that too. Pro number, let's see, 6 is Akira Ifukube's music. Now, unfortunately, I kind of have to agree with Sean, as I don't think this is quite one of Akira Ifukube's absolute best scores, but I do like this movie's score quite a bit. There's some elements of this movie's score that I absolutely adore. Like, I still have it stuck in my head. The opening theme for the opening credits. Love it. It starts off big and bombastic to get your attention, and then it gets really creepy and suspenseful. And then you hear Rodan's roar, and then just erupts into this loud fanfare of trumpets. It's so eerie, and it's so fucking spectacular to listen to. I love it. And then there's other moments in the movie score where it's a lot more subdued. That are really creepy too. Like the music that plays when Rodan hatches, that's really, really good. And the music that plays during Rodan's Fukuoka attack is really good too. But then there's other elements of Ifukube's score that are just okay. It's Ifukube. Ifukube has never ever done a bad score in his entire career. But well, there's War of the Gargantuas.
No, I mean I like the music in War of the Gargantuas a lot.
But anyway, so yeah, the movie score is a little bit of a mixed bag. It has its moments when it's really, really, really good, but then there's others where it's just kind of basic Ifukube. It's not bad, but it's not great either. But I like this movie score. God, I keep losing track.
I think you're on 7 or 8. You gotta be.
Pro number 8 is the first half of this movie. Like I said, it is very good. This is definitely very different from what typical giant monster movies start out as. This literally is just an invasion of giant dragonfly nymphs. It's creepy, and I love the way the mega neurons look. I have an idea on how the suit actors moved around in these things. They're kind of just like Chinese dragon puppets, where the suit actor is like hunched over and he's like squat walking, like he's controlling the claws and his head is kind of right behind the Meganeuron's head, and he's just squat walking around with the Meganeuron's tail dragging behind him, which I have to say that must have been incredibly uncomfortable. But
oh yeah, probably.
And you never see if there was any shots, I never saw them. You never see the suit actor's legs. And I really like the way that these things move. It definitely looks like they're just slithering around, or they have like hundreds of little legs along their tail.
Oh yeah, the sound mixing, I guess you could add that to one of my pros too. Really helps with their presence on film. You hear like you just kind of hear like when they walk too, and you hear that like that indistinguishable sound.
The loud chittering.
I don't know what you call it. The what?
The loud chittering sound.
Yeah, the loud chittering sound. Like that's one thing that sticks with me. As soon as you hear that, you know you're fucked.
Yeah, kind of like in the original Them when you hear the ants chirping sound.
Yeah.
Well, here it's a lot more squeaky, and I definitely kind of do think here it's a little bit more annoying than the ant noises from Them, but it is still very distinctive. And like Sean says, when you hear that, run.
Yeah, you're fucked.
Yeah, I like the way that they that the Meganeurons look. I like the suit designs. Their eyes and their jaws are really, really creepy too. The big compound bug eyes look really creepy. And the way their pincers move, it looks very creepy. Like bugs scare the shit out of me. I literally almost had a heart attack when I found one singular cockroach in a truck I was unloading at work. Like I almost had a heart attack. I kept thinking, I already have.
See, that's me and snakes. Like, I mean, I see them sometimes when I'm out cutting the grass, and they just pop. The thing is, like, I can watch TV stuff with snakes. If they're behind glass, that's fine. It's just when I'm out working, it's just like they pop out of nowhere, and like they just freak you out because they can contort their bodies. One time, my dog got a hold of one.
Duchess!
Bit in half. Flung half of it, and it hit the fence. And we thought this thing was dead. So I really goes to pick the thing up, and the thing starts slithering away with half its body missing. I was like, "Zombie snake, run!" And I'm like, "This thing is horrifying. Like its entrails are coming out, and it's still slithering away." I'm like, kill it.
Yep.
I mean, it was a pretty disturbing image. But yeah, like that's me. Like I understand people have their phobias. Snakes is mine. Like, yeah. I mean, I bought snake tongs and gloves. Like, I've picked snakes up before. It's just, I don't like working and then they just pop out of nowhere. So, and I hate myself for it. Like, I'm like, stop being a bitch and just pick up the damn snake and move it. But that's the only phobia.
I absolutely hate bugs. Like, literally, I tolerate flies and gnats and butterflies barely. but I am so deathly afraid of bugs. It's not even funny.
Right.
So yeah, the first half of this movie is overall pretty enjoyable. Pro number 9 is the action scenes in this movie. There's not a whole, there's kind of a whole lot. There is the military attacking the mega neurons, which is pretty entertaining. There's the dog fight, which is pretty impressive with Rodan, especially for the time.
I really like the dog fight.
The dog fight's pretty entertaining. And then there's the Fukuoka attack, which is, again, easily the best part of the movie. This will, of course, just lead me into pro number 10 is the special effects for this movie are pretty damn solid. And it also, I like that this showcased a different kind of monster going on a rampage. This is the first movie where we see a flying monster. Okay.
Congratulations. That was very necessary.
Always. Anyway, so
always.
Yeah, this is the first movie to incorporate a flying monster, and I think they pull it off very well. Godzilla's the king of the monsters, but Rodan is definitely the king of the skies.
Except when Ghidorah shows up.
Yeah, except when Ghidorah shows up, but whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough for me to choose favorites amongst the monsters. I think my favorite Godzilla opponent is Mechagodzilla. Mechagodzilla's number 1, Mechagodzilla's 2 for me. But like after that, it's really tough to choose. Like I love Space Godzilla.
Gigan.
Destroya Orga, Ghidorah, Rodan, Mothra,
Gigan.
Anguirus, Gigan, Megalon, Jet Jaguar. Which, by the way, fuck yeah, Jet Jaguar is coming back. And of course, Gabra is everyone's favorite, which is also coming back in Singular Point.
Oh, I just look forward to our Godzilla's Revenge review.
Oh, fuck yeah. That's the one I'm most excited for.
Anyway, so the action scenes and the special effects are pretty damn solid, especially for this movie's time. You can very much tell that for some reason, Toho decided to just shell out a pretty decent budget for this movie. The miniature sets are very, very, very well made. They're extremely well detailed. Like, I definitely buy this as a city.
Right. That's what I buy. I definitely buy this as a city too. Again, great. There's some really great use of the miniatures and blending it in with the backgrounds and that too.
All the matte paintings in this movie look really, really solid. I'll say that you can definitely tell that they're matte paintings, but they still look really, really good. They're very well detailed. Right. The miniature sets
are. They're matte paintings as much in the English version, I think, because the grainier quality, but definitely the Japanese version. So I guess that's a pro for the English version. Like it, in a lot of ways, the shittier video quality helps hide the defects.
True. Yeah, the miniatures are well made. Rodan's suit. Anyway, so Rodan's suit looks really well constructed. And I should say another aspect about Rodan's design that I like over the Pigeon Rodan is that this version of Rodan has much more pronounced legs. If that makes any sense. Like with Pigeon Rodan, he kind of just looks like he has stubby legs. And most of his body mass is in his wings and kind of in his like main body. But with this Rodan, he's much more evenly proportioned. Like he has large wings, but he still has a large torso, a long neck, a big beak, and he has kind of long legs. So he's much more evenly proportioned than the Pigeon Rodan, which is just ridiculous looking. But like I always remember that one scene where Haruo Nakajima was in the suit and he's like flapping over a building and then he lands and he like stretches his legs down to stomp into a building. I always remembered that scene because it looks like Rodan actually has fully functional legs, not just for like standing, but for walking around and picking shit up. It also still does make him look very reptilian and dinosaurian. So I thought that was cool. But the destruction scenes are overall very, very entertaining. Like watching Rodan flap his wings and just destroy everything with high bursts of wind. It's very well done. That's a very common ability among giant Japanese monsters, is the ability to use their wings to create hurricane force winds. Like Mothra does it, Rodan does it, Ghidorah does it, Titanosaurus does it. Tons of Ultraman monsters do it. No, all those monsters throughout Toho does that. So, and this is the first monster to incorporate that kind of attack, and it's perfectly executed with the with the first try. Pardon my wife's coughing.
I'm dying.
That's okay. Hopefully she feels better.
Thanks.
She says thanks.
You're welcome.
One of my favorite aspects is that Rodan also turns Fukuoka into a sea of fire, where we see the skyline of Fukuoka, and in the background we just see nothing but tall, towering flames, just out of the original Godzilla. That really stuck out to me with the most recent viewing, and I was like, oh, that looks so cool in color. It's a little faded, like in the background. You can tell that the flames in the background is a composite shot because they're a lot more faded than the foreground stuff. But that really stuck out to me in a positive way. I was just thinking, ooh, that looks right out of the original Godzilla. That looks so fucking cool. Yeah, the effects are great and the action scenes are fun. And they're the highlight of the film, in my opinion. So with all these good things to say about the original Rodan, what are your cons, Sean?
Well, I do agree with a lot of your pros. I mean, you kind of just went into more detail than what I did. I feel like I kind of like combined a lot of them into like certain pieces. But yeah, I think you brought up some great points in your pros. And I guess I'll add one thing: the human cast. Like I said, I like Shigeru, Kenji Sahara. But
one more thing, real quick: the eruption of Mount Aso looks fantastic.
Oh, exactly. Like I said, there's some really great special effects moments in this movie too that still like look really well. Like I said, the aerial sequences, like just the stuff where they're kind of flying in the sky and wondering, like, do they actually go out and film some stuff? Like it feels like really authentic for a lot of it too. Kind of makes me think a little bit of the movie Top Gun. But again, like obviously Top Gun's got a bigger budget, more modern cameras in that. But like some of the aerial sequences, I think are really impressive in the original Rodan. I think really the most impressive aerial sequences in I guess in the whole Showa era. I can't think of any of the subsequent films that do it better than the first Rodan.
Yeah, it's debatable, but yeah, the dogfight scenes are very well shot, especially for the time. I'll give them that.
Yeah, so then I guess we'll get into some of the cons. Con number one, the human element. Again, I like Shigeru, and I think like he has a nice, sweet relationship in the movie. But really, outside of that, I can't remember. I just watched the movie last week. I can't remember any standout human characters at all. I legitimately can't. Like it's just like as soon as I watched it, like I watched it twice back and forth, but like none of them really stand out. And that's kind of an issue I had with a lot of the early Showa films. Is a lot of the human characters and the human elements. Like it took them a little bit, but I feel like a lot of them didn't stand out. Like I feel like really the first cast I feel like that really kind of delivered, in my opinion, was Mothra versus Godzilla. Like a really strong
cast. I can kind of agree with that. Well, you remember King Kong versus Godzilla's cast, but not for the right reason.
Really just Mr. Taco. Mr. Taco is my personal favorite. Really, like you got Mr. Taco, and like I mean the other characters are fine, but Mr. Taco is the only one that really stands out per se in that movie. But Mothra vs. Godzilla, I felt like had a really strong human cast, and really like Jun Fukuda like did well with his human casts. And like I mean he didn't direct that one, but I feel like the human stories got better as they kept going. Like it really, like Invasion of Astro Monster, the human element's better than the monster stuff.
Yes.
And you know,
which is odd.
It's both. It is odd. It is really odd. I think having Nick Adams in your movie just makes it better.
True.
As an actor, because he like there. But anyways, so the human element, again, really outside of one character, I'm not really feeling the rest of things. Yeah, it's nice he has like a sweet relationship, which again is a lot better than Emiko and Ogata's non-interesting relationship in the original Godzilla, but still not quite there. Like we're still not there yet. Again, they're experimenting, trying to figure things out. Con number 2. I hate to say it. I don't think it's a bad score, but it's definitely like compared to a lot of other Ifuku-based scores. I'm hard on it because I know how talented of a composer he is, but it really doesn't stand out that much to me. Like the original Godzilla score really stands out. King Kong vs. Godzilla, Mothra vs. Godzilla especially stands out. I think that's a really, really strong score. But the original Rodan score, like even like I'm trying to really almost kind of remember, like it doesn't stand out to me quite as much as some of his other stuff. It kind of just feels like leftover tracks from other movies, if I'm being honest. Not a terrible score. There's still some like good tracks in there, but like compared to some of his other work, it doesn't really stand out per se. But again, I have no disrespect to the legend himself. He's one of my all-time favorite composers, but I'm a little bit harder on him because I know how talented he is as a composer. So the score doesn't stand out to me quite as much as I would have hoped. Con number 3, some of the special effects don't quite hold up so well. And again, I understand the time, but like there's some what is the word, like mapping effects or chroma effects. What do you call it, where they're kind of inserting into the background?
Composite shots.
Composite shots, yeah. Some of the composite shots don't hold up quite as well as I would have hoped. Yeah, like again, it's 1955, so I'm willing to forgive it. Like here and there, like there's 56.
Yeah,
56. Sorry. Yeah, it's the 1950s, so it's really like I can't get too mad at it. Like there are some impressive ones for the time.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the next con, the ending is kind of a bit of a downer.
Yeah,
it doesn't really feel like it doesn't really pack a punch. It's just kind of like they just kind of just slowly like horrifically burn to death, and I'm like, okay. Like it doesn't really like have a big emotional payoff. Like the original Gojira, like that scene where Serizawa sacrifices himself, like it really sticks with you. Like it's a really memorable scene. Like the music is really there to help elevate it. This one, it's it's just not really standing out like quite as much as I would have hoped. But I mean, it's not terrible, but it doesn't really pack the punch I was hoping for. Like I remember it, but like you kind of get what I'm saying. It's kind of a bit of a downer of an ending, and not that downer endings don't work for movies. I think Stephen King's The Mist. Like,
that's probably the number one biggest example of a downer ending that does work.
Exactly, and that's one that like stands out. Like that's one. It's like holy shit! Like you just see that. Like the guy's like if he just would have waited like an extra minute, like he would have been fine. Like that's a dark ending done well. Like that's where I'm like, okay, this really works. And but like dark endings don't always work. Tragic endings don't always work. But that's an example one that really, really works, and in a lot of ways is better than I think even King himself liked it better than his book.
Yeah, he did.
Like, that's one that sticks with me. But yeah, like this one, it's just a bit of a downer. It doesn't really leave you feeling much.
Nope.
I guess another con too. I'm trying to think if there's any other I can add, but really maybe some pacing bits here and there. But really, all things considered, I think this is a pretty solid kaiju film. It's definitely early within the genre. They're still working things out, so I got to give it like the benefit of the doubt for a lot of things. Because again, it's early on. They don't have their craft mastered. It's kind of like a TV show. Mm-hmm. Where like sometimes with first seasons they're kind of still figuring things out before they really get into a rhythm. And I feel like it took a few movies before they really got into their rhythm. Like Toho in general, like I feel like one that really perfected it. Again, Mothra vs. Godzilla. When we eventually get to talking about that one, that's one I just think really had everything going for it. But Rodan is still a solid film in general. So like I don't really like have any big major cons per se. I just think some elements aren't quite as strong.
Well, I have quite a few. I have 6 cons with the original Rodan. I'll just get this one out of the way. I think this movie has slight Sinister 2 syndrome. Now, I haven't said this in a while. For those of you who are unaware, I coined the phrase Sinister 2 syndrome from the film Sinister 2 because I think Sinister 2's biggest problem is that it feels like two movies going on at the same time. I give this problem to a lot of movies. Another big example is The X from Outer Space. Literally feels like it has a 45-minute movie in the beginning half and a 45-minute movie at the second half that's smashed together at the exact middle. It feels like a space opera in the first half, and it feels like a Godzilla ripoff in the second half. And it is better in the second half of that movie, but that's only because the space opera shit is just so bland and boring. I do feel like this movie has slight Sinister 2 syndrome because the movie starts out as just a 50s Japanese version of them. It works because it's entertaining and it's tense and it's fun to watch. My main issue, though, is that while Rodan is a great monster and when he's on screen, the movie is really good, Rodan doesn't really show up until I think a little bit more than halfway through the film.
Right. But again, I'm kind of on the boat where I kind of like that a bit. I mean, I know it's titled Rodan, but I like how it kind of like has a bit of a twist.
Well, no, the twist of having these monsters that are so nasty and such a big threat to literally just be a snack to a bigger threat, that's a good twist. But still, it does make me feel like almost the crew wanted to make two different kinds of movies and they just combined them into one. It's not nearly as...
I totally understand that, and you know what? I'll say this: like, where you kind of get the Sinister 2 syndrome, I get the kind of From Dusk Till Dawn syndrome when I watch this movie, where it's like From Dusk Till Dawn. The first half of that movie, like, you have no freaking idea that it's going to lead to vampires when you start that movie out. It's just when they get to the bar, then all of a sudden, out of the blue, it just dramatically shifts, and it's fucking awesome that way. That's kind of the way I see Rodan. Again, it's like we have these horrifying creatures, then you just find out they're fucking snacks. Like, holy shit! And this thing, like, it really adds to the fear factor of it, makes it a lot more imposing. Well,
yes,
I get where you're coming from. I totally do.
That is very true. And like I said, the twist that the Mega Neurons, big threats themselves, are just mere snacks. It is a good twist. And there are future Ishiro Honda and monster movies that do have Sinister 2 syndrome that are worse. Like Dogora, for example, where it literally does feel like Ishiro Honda wanted to make one movie, but Tomoyuki Tanaka wanted a different movie, so they just did their own things. But the Sinister 2 syndrome, it's not very strong with this movie, but upon this most recent viewing, I could definitely kind of feel like, this almost feels like two different movies. But still, the twist works, so I'll give that credit where credit's due. Con number 2 is while this movie's color, pardon my wife as she makes food. Ew.
What?
Hummus is nasty.
I agree, it is nasty.
Thank you. The color does look very gorgeous in many, many parts of this film. But the one aspect of the color that does not work, there's a lot of obvious day for night shots in this movie. It's almost as bad as the original Night of the Living... Actually, no, this is worse than the original Night of the Living Dead, because at least that movie is in black and white. You could still kind of say, it's day for night, but because it's so dark, you could just say, this is night. But with this movie being in color, the day for night shots really stick out. And I can understand this was the first color movie for Toho, so I give them a little bit of slack. They were still figuring out their stuff, but the day for night shots in this movie look really, really, really obvious. And they kind of clash with a lot of the moments where the Mega Neuron is holding the two dummy props. There, it's obviously supposed to be night. It's brightly lit still, but it's obviously supposed to be night. And then you see all the dudes on the slope walking uphill. You can tell this is a day for night shot, clearly. And it's just kind of jarring to intermix that with the Mega Neuron prop, which is obviously shot at night. So yeah, well, again, this movie, really lands the color photography very, very, very well. In terms of the day for night shots, that's the only area where it stumbles. Con number 3 is that there's a little bit of an atomic allegory in this film, and it's unnecessary, in my opinion. I feel like that's just a carryover from the original Gojira, and Ishiro Honda just wanted to reiterate the atomic weapons are bad type stuff. The American version is even worse. Like, the opening scene of this movie is a shot of an atomic bomb exploding, which I'm pretty sure is the same one that they used for Gigantus the Fire Monster.
Oh yeah, there's like certain stock footage that you see in a lot of movies.
Well, I'm not saying it's a bad message, but for this movie, I just feel like it's really, really unnecessary. That's not what the movie's purpose is. It's just to showcase color and new special effects, a new monster, and maybe the love allegory, which I think is not terrible, but it's just kind of meh. You can take that for what it is, but the atomic allegory is extremely unnecessary, in my opinion. It just feels like a carryover from the original Gojira. I also don't like that that's what they say is what is reawakening the Rodans. I kind of just would leave it at Mount Aso is starting to become more active, and all the earthquakes and volcanic eruptions reawakens Rodan, and that's what his origin is. He just so happened to be there for millions of years, and all the rumbling woke up Rodan. I feel like that's what you should have done for Rodan's origin, and having the atomic allegory there just kind of makes things a little too complicated and complex. Con number 4 is the ending. I'm really not a big fan of this movie's ending. It feels mean-spirited, and it also just feels anticlimactic. Like right after the Fukuoka attack ends, the movie just speeds up, but also trudges to the ending just to get it over with. Like, oh, we're just going to bombard, pardon the helicopter. We're just going to bombard Mount Aso. Oh, thank you. Ooh, goldfish. We're just going to bombard. You didn't just spill all that hummus, did you?
No, I spilled all my pretzels.
Okay, good.
But it's okay, I can pick those up.
We're just gonna bombard the volcano until it erupts and it melts these two monsters with magma. Cool. I mean, it looks great with Mount Aso erupting. Looks really cool, but it just feels a little anticlimactic. Like, oh, okay, there's no special weapons. There's no power of human ingenuity. We're just gonna melt monsters with lava. Yay. Whatever. So yeah, I'm not a big fan of this movie's ending. It just feels like it comes out of nowhere. Con number 5 is I think this movie is a little short. The Sinister 2 syndrome could have been fixed if the second half of this movie was a little longer. Again, if they... I also would have liked them to establish that the reason why the Rodans are attacking all over the place. They kind of do this in an episode of Godzilla, the animated series, where when Quetzalcoatl is awakened, it's attacking cities just for garbage to make its nest. I wish they could have done that with this movie where they showcase Rodans flying all over the world to get supplies for their nest because they're starting to lay eggs. But they don't do that. I feel like that's a missed opportunity. I just feel like that could have been a great thing to showcase to make this movie a little longer. But as it currently stands, I feel like this movie is a little too short. On one hand, it does make it a bit easier to watch because this movie is so simple and straightforward. But I still feel like there's some missed opportunities and there's a little bit of missing footage that could have been added to make this movie a little better. And the final con that I will say about this movie, this is the one aspect of the special effects that I have some major grievances with. There's a lot of wire shots in this movie. there's a lot of points, especially when Rodan starts flying around, where you can clearly see the wires. Now, there is a famous scene where Rodan is flying around, and shooting that scene, the wire supporting Haruo Nakajima snapped, and Haruo Nakajima fell 25 feet and landed into a big pool of water. I think it was the bridge scene. Now, thankfully, the big wings absorbing the weight of the landing saved Haruo Nakajima's life. So it is understandable that they had to use literally piano wire to support the suit's weight. But still, there's a lot of shots in this movie where you can clearly see all the wires pulling around Rodan's suit, lifting Haruo Nakajima up in the air, pulling around all the tanks and all the planes. There's a lot of wire shots in this movie, and it really did stick out to me on this most recent reviewing. I think that is easily the worst aspect of this movie's effects.
Can I just say something really quick? Props to the suit actors of Toho, man. They went through some serious shit for these movies. Like, I mean, the Godzilla suit getting set on fire, all these explosions going off, nearly dying, drowning. God, they suffered for their art. And, like, you know, the quality definitely shows on screen, but, like, I always got to give props to the suit actors. Like, I mean, that's a very dangerous job at times, but it definitely, like, makes for some really good content. So, props to the suit actors. So.
Yep, agreed. The whole slew of injuries that Haruo Nakajima had to deal with. Explosions going off all over his face and his chest as Gaira, snapping and falling 25 feet as Rodan, being buried alive as Baragon, having an explosion go off underneath his balls as Varan, which that was probably the worst injury that he ever received on set as a monster. Yeah, Haruo Nakajima. Oh, and of course, all the trials and tribulations with the various Godzilla suits. Yeah, Haruo Nakajima went through some shit. And
you know what? Like, he just seems to be a really fun guy. Like, he was so full of life. Like, he wasn't a complainer, though. Like, he just toughed it out. Like, I gotta give props to these suit actors, because, like, a lot of actors can be real pansies at times, like whiners, like, oh, I can't do this. But, like, some people like that, like Haruo, very tough son of a bitch. Like, I mean, props to that guy. Like, the shit he went through. But, like I said, like, we got some really great content out of it. So, props to him. Like, he was great.
Yep. And I definitely feel like I would be one of those people. I'd just be like, yeah, I have one of my testicles nearly blown off, but I'm playing a giant monster. I don't give a fuck. I'm just going to keep going. So that's all I have to say about the original Rodan. Final thoughts, Sean? You look like you're about to pass out.
I mean, I've been up for quite a while. I didn't really sleep much last night. I've been up for like how many hours? A really long time. I think I woke up at like 3 a.m. And it's like almost 6 p.m. right now. So I've been up for quite a while today. But final thoughts on the original Rodan. I really do enjoy this movie. It's definitely not my favorite kaiju film.
Mine neither.
I do feel like it is. It's a very solid kaiju movie. Like, there's some really good elements to it. I love the aerial sequences. I love Rodan. I like exploring elements of PTSD, kind of throwing that in there, which I thought added a little bit. I like how it starts out as like kind of like one movie, and then you find out like the twist that it's just prey for another monster. I thought that all worked. Again, I don't think it's Ishiro Honda's best movie. They're definitely experimenting on some things. There are some minor gripes here and there, but I really do think it is a solid kaiju film. Definitely one of the again, just a solid all-around kaiju film within the genre, and it's a good starting point for Rodan. And he would later go on to star in a ton of Godzilla films, starting with Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. And again, I really like Rodan. Rodan is the Starscream of the Godzilla franchise. Like, his allegiance is constantly changing, and he really isn't ever just a straight-up good monster per se. He's just kind of like whatever side keeps him from getting like destroyed. And I like how he becomes like he becomes Godzilla's first friend in a way. I know Anguirus is Godzilla's best buddy. Like, if you have to figure out like I'll pick like a best friend for Godzilla, I would go with Anguirus. But Rodan was kind of his first friend. And I forget, am I on the Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster one, or is that somebody else on that one?
No, I think that's you, or maybe it's Trev.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll have to check again, because like that's one I definitely would like to talk about. especially because that one did a great job. Really kind of like developing the monsters as characters. So, but we'll get to that when we talk about that later on. But anyways, I really like the first Rodan. Not my favorite, but an all-around solid kaiju film. And classic Showa with some nice horror elements to it. So, yeah, there you go.
Agreed. So, my final thoughts on Rodan. I do like this movie. It's a good film. It's very enjoyable. It's classic early 50s Showa. I think everybody can agree the 50s was the experimental period with Toho.
Exactly. It wasn't their best, but it was experimental. I feel like the 60s.
60s was their golden age.
60s was the golden age. Although the 70s did have Mechagodzilla.
True.
So
there's a 50s.
That's tough on me
70s.
because I really love Mechagodzilla.
So yeah, this movie is a massive experiment piece, and there's a lot of things they stick the landing with. There's a couple things that they don't, and that's what really keeps this from being a major classic. But I do recommend this movie. My wife is a big fan of pteranodons, so she liked Rodan's depiction in King of the Monsters, and I made sure that she got a look at Baby Rodan in this movie.
Oh yeah, Baby Rodan's adorable. Like that's definitely a pro.
Yes. So if you're a big fan of Rodan and you still haven't seen the original Rodan movie, you really need to rectify that. And there's a lot of firsts as well for this film. First time in color, first time during in broad daylight, first time showcasing a flying kaiju, and also the first appearance of one of the big five.
The first Rodan is, so I saw that there. So.
Yep.
If you want to check it out, that's a good place for it.
And also get this disc to check out the Bringing Godzilla Down to Size documentary. So my final rating, Sean, what's your final rating?
What did I give the original Godzilla? Do you remember?
I think it was a 7.5.
Okay, I'll give this one a 7 out of 10. Again, I still prefer the original Godzilla, but there are things I like more in this one. Like I said, I think I like the violence a bit more. I like the gore and horror elements, and I think the action sequences are better in this one because obviously the first Godzilla movie is like their first try. I like the color because color really helped flesh things out, like really some beautiful cinematography throughout the movie. But yeah, I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. I think that's about as high as I could go. There's a lot of things that could have done better, but it is more of an experimental thing, and Toho is still kind of getting their footing down, but I think they mostly succeeded. So 7 out of 10 for me.
So I am going to once again give the original Rodan a 7.5 out of 10. I think it's a little bit more of a better made film than the original Godzilla. Like there's some aspects of the effects that are a little bit more refined, but there's also a little bit more aspects of the effects that are kind of weak. It also hits a lot of the same beats in terms of the human characters as the original Godzilla. I also don't think this movie is nearly as important to the whole world of cinema as the original Godzilla is. And I think that's what really balances it out. Like which is the better movie, the original Godzilla or the original Rodan? There's pros and cons to both. One's more important and one's a little bit better made. One's in black and white, that makes it darker and creepier. One's in color, that makes it more flashy and gorgeous. So they both have their
romance. The other one has a not as awful, more touching romance.
Yeah, there's that too. So they both have their strengths and weaknesses.
Right.
So yeah, 7.5 out of 10. It's a good movie. Check it out. It's one of the classic 50s monster movies. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Sean, got anything to plug?
Just a couple of comic book videos on the channel. I'm going to be working on the next Rip review sometime soon. I'm trying to think of like what kind of the next big goal for the channel is. Right now, I'm kind of just, I'm just doing some comic book stuff for the time being, and I'm just kind of plotting like what I'm going to come out with next to the channel. So I might do some more after the movies. I did kind of want to do a video on Halloween. I'm not sure what, maybe a brief after the movie, or just kind of maybe a countdown or something. I don't know.
How about a commentary?
Getting pretty close. What's that?
How about a commentary?
a commentary, like a whole movie commentary. I could do that. I mean, I've done watch parties live.
Yeah,
on the
that
channel,
a watch party for the original Halloween because you like the movie. I don't.
Right. I know your 2018 is your favorite, which I just did a review on that one. So that was that was a fun video to do. That was the most fun I had doing a video in a long time. But I got more stuff coming along the way. Maybe some video essays. All this talk about Godzilla stuff is making me really want to get back into doing some more Godzilla content on the channel. I got to do a video on Singular Point. I haven't really talked about that yet because I've been just kind of because what I do with a lot of the comic stuff, I have a Comixology account. I just do a screen recording for my iPhone now, and I think it's because before I used to go onto my computer, do Bandicam, edit it, just try and do all this stuff. It takes way too long. It's so much easier and more simple to just do it all right from my phone. But I definitely want to get into doing some more Godzilla content on the channel because it's fun. I mean, we're kind of in that point where we're just waiting to see what happens with Godzilla versus Kong. Will it get delayed again? I don't know because
God, I hope not.
Theatrical. What's that?
God, I hope not.
I hope not either.
We were supposed to own it by now, for Christ's sake.
It should be coming out in 3 weeks. That's the sad part. It should. I even put in that day off for work months ago, before it got delayed because I was ready for it. And I'm just fuck, I want to see this movie. I want a trailer. I mean, I'm doing okay now that I got some Singular Point content to kind of help fill the void. At least we got that, and it's going to be 13 episodes next year. So at least we're guaranteed Godzilla content next year. So at least that's a good thing. But I really want a fucking trailer for Godzilla versus Kong. Again, I understand why they're not doing it because you don't know if you're going to delay things. You don't want to spend money marketing a movie and then have it just be delayed and restart again. So they're being smart about it. I mean, we're just impatient because we're very excited to see this movie. I'm
very excited to see Godzilla win finally against Kong.
Right. I don't want Kong to die. I want it to be like Rocky, where he goes the distance but still loses, but ultimately earns the respect. Do you really want Kong to die? You want him to lose, but you don't want him to die, right?
If he does die, I won't be sad, but yeah, that's how I would want it to be. I want Kong to get his ass kicked, defeated, but not dead.
Right, but he has to put up a good fight. Otherwise, if it's so one-sided, it's not going to be fun. I'm curious how he's going to get his fucking battle axe. I thought I was theorizing with Ryan that he's going to go inside the Hollow Earth to find some ancient temple with a Kong family on a fucking throne. And his battle axe is his Mjolnir, maybe wielding electricity and shit. I don't know. That just sounds really fucking out there. But you know what? What do you think? Do you think Kong wielding a battle axe is a little too hokey, or do you think it's just fucking awesome?
I think it's cool. But anyway, so
I think it's cool too.
Off the track. So that'll about do it for this review of the original Rodan. Post your comments down below. Let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button, and share this video with your friends. And look forward to a couple more hours later today, where I will be talking about the next of Toho's 3 big experiment pieces in the 1950s, with the original 1957 sci-fi film, The Mysterians. Look forward to that, and I will see you guys in the next one. And if you see giant bugs running around, just
get the fuck
wait,
out of there.
Just get the fuck away for Rodan to eat them. I'm sure he's hungry.
Yep, exactly. So